Hi everyone, welcome to week 1 of BK121, your last class of the program before externship. How exciting. It's a class that I am super jazzed about. You're going to hear excitement from me every single week because this part of the industry is really where the money's at. Even if you do not see yourself in the cake decorating world and you don't see yourself more in the bake shop side of things. Maybe you really see yourself on the dinner service side of things. You want to work at a higher dinner establishment or a hotel, and this isn't something you necessarily see yourself doing. That's totally fine, but I will tell you that while you are building your career, cakes will make you the money that can help you get there. That is true for me. It is true for so many pastry chefs that I know. Something that has changed in the world is Instagram. We now have Instagram. So now when people have parties, even if it's just a regular Joe Schmo party, their food doesn't just have to be yummy, it has to be Instagram worthy, it has to be photo worthy, right? So that means more people are coming to us more frequently for those Instagram worthy cakes and cookies. And at $45 to $60 for a small cake that once you learn the techniques you could whip out super quickly. That again, if you sell 12 of those a week, you make a huge chunk of money that you can put into your business and career and investing in equipment, even if you see yourself going in a totally different direction. So I always start off with that speech because I know that a lot of you have a lot of different dreams about which field you want to be in pastry, and that doesn't always involve cake, but that doesn't mean that cakes can't still make you money. So that's my disclaimer about cakes. I hope that you guys are excited about that. I have seen most of your faces throughout the program, and I'm happy to see all of you again. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Chef Genevieve. I'm actually an alumni of Escoffier. I graduated from the pastry program, the Boulder campus, almost 8 years ago now, a long time ago. So I have been in your shoes, really in the same shoes, and I know that it is challenging. This class is going to be fast. Each assignment is big, but I have faith in you guys. You're at the end of your program. You guys are advanced students now. I know that a lot of you are nervous for your upcoming externship and have a lot of questions, and I'm glad that you have questions. Next week, I'm going to have your externship instructor, come and talk to us about all the things that we need to know, need to be prepared, what papers need to be in, what papers are expected later on. She's going to come give us the 411 on that next week. So we'll be prepared. I promise that we're not going to leave you hanging in the dark. We are here to help guide you through that transition. Let me see here. All right, so the first thing I want to do is jump to our class page. You guys know how the class page works, but I just want to remind you of a few things. I will have a class announcements button up here once I post an announcement in it today. That will be an area where I post things that I want you all to know but don't need you to reply to. If I message you in our normal Moodle messaging, that's probably a one-on-one message, so you can respond to that. But in class announcements, that's just a general item that I want you all to know. Ask your questions here is our class cafe. I like to post fun stuff in this class cafe, but it is really for you guys to be interacting with each other, not a place to ask me questions. If you have a question for me, please message me directly. I will respond to your question much faster. I will see it much faster. So if you have a question for me, direct message me. But this Class Cafe, again, is a great place to share with your classmates, share pictures of your work, especially in this class, you guys. I think that that's something that I really loved about being on the ground campus, is that I got to see my classmates work. Often, I'm a very competitive person, so I got inspired by their work and felt challenged by it in a positive way. It made me want to step up my game. So I really encourage you guys to share your weekly projects in this Class Cafe. Throughout the weeks, if you check out our week 1 field guide that I have posted on this page, right here, it walks you through a quick glance at what we're doing through the weeks. So we'll just take a quick look. So week 1, we're going to be working on the creaming method, Italian buttercream, icing our cake with a flat coat of icing, and a shell border. These are the basics, but we have to walk before we run when it comes to cakes. It is also this basic cake form, though, you can learn how to flat ice in under 2 minutes. If you prep correctly, you can really, really bust out a lot of this simple cake quickly, and people still spend big bucks on a cake like this. They a lot of times want to put their own candles on or their own flowers on, and so if you can knock out 30 flat white ice cakes to sell in a week and make yourself some money, that's really awesome. So a few helpful hints. We're going to dive deeper into the creaming method and Italian buttercream in a minute, but the Escoffier formula for the cake, for the creaming method yellow butter cake, should be increased by about 50% more. So 1 full recipe and then half a recipe more in order to get a decent sized cake. You might have a little bit of leftover batter, but I want you guys to have enough to create all of the layers that you might want to. 2 are going to be required, but I recommend 3. Then for Italian buttercream, something I'm going to tell you guys right off the bat, it is a very buttery flavor. It is much more buttery and less sweet than what you are probably accustomed to. Most frosting that we get from the store is American buttercream, which is shortening and powdered sugar. So it's got a much sweeter sugary taste than this Italian buttercream. Now, I prefer Italian buttercream. You guys have seen my outgoing message with appreciation in butter. I love butter. I think that Italian buttercream tastes more mature. It has a more elegant flavor. You don't have to love it. If you taste it this week and you're like, this isn't for me, that's okay. We're going to be making Swiss buttercream and American buttercream in this class as well. But it's a really good skill, and it's also a very stable frosting, a really smooth frosting that I think makes decorating much easier. I'm going to ask you guys to do a shell border this week. One of the reasons I'm specifying shell is because a shell border requires you to have a consistent piping motion, which means that you're not starting and stopping. You're applying pressure and releasing, but you aren't really pulling away. Whereas, let's say a pearl method or a bead method, you're making a dot, pulling away, making a dot, pulling away with your piping bag. And that's what we want to avoid this week. I want a continuous border on the top edge of your cake and the bottom of your cake. So that's something to keep your eye out on. In week 2, we're going to work on the 2-stage method. We're going to make a chocolate mousse based on a pâte à bombe, which means it contains egg yolks. And we're going to work on mirror glazes or ganache glazes. You'll have a choice if you want to do a mirror glaze or a ganache glaze. Week 3, we're going to make Swiss buttercream and American buttercream. We're going to do a chiffon method cake and make buttercream flowers. So already what I want you guys to notice, these are big projects, right? Week 1, you got to make a full cake. Week 2, you got to make a full cake. Week 3, you got to make a full cake. So this class is going to be about organization and planning, and that's something I'm here to help you do 100%. We can create production charts together so that I can help you split up the big assignment into more manageable chunks throughout your week. Week 4 is where things start to slow down a little, but it's because your week 6 project is really big. So we're trying to break it up in a way that's easier for you guys. Week 4, you're going to bake the layers of your cakes for your week 6 project. Your week 6 project will be a 2-tiered stacked cake covered in fondant with gum paste flowers. So in week 4, we are going to make the layers for that cake, and we are going to start our gum paste flowers because gum paste flowers take a long time. Week 5, we're going to finish those flowers. We're going to make the buttercreams that we need to fill and crumb coat our cake. And then week 6, you're going to finish construction. Put it all together, cover it in fondant, put on your flowers. So big project, but again, if we stay on top of it, starting at week 4, you guys will be more than prepared for that week 6. It really will work. That schedule will work well for you. So a few things to know. Assignments, same as always, due on Tuesday nights at 11:59 p.m. CST. Knowledge checks, oops, sorry guys. Knowledge checks and discussion forums. So discussion forums, same idea, initial post by Saturday, 2 peer replies by the following Tuesday. But with discussion forums, I'm a little bit more open if that we have a really challenging week, I am able to go back in there. You guys, the discussion forums stay open so that you can respond. I want you guys to really have fun in those discussion forums. You just have to let me know after, if it's past the week, if you've gone in and adjusted something. Something new, there are no makeups anymore. So this class will not have makeup assignments. Now that doesn't mean that you can't have an emergency. It just means it will be a case-by-case basis. So if something of drastic happens, life happens, we get that, we are understanding of that. All that means is you need to reach out to me, let me know what's going on, I'll tell you what steps we need to take and how we can work out a plan for you to get caught up in that area. But I want you guys to be prepared for that, to know that there's no safety net of makeup assignments anymore. Let's see here. You have a discussion forum in week 3 and week 5. You have a knowledge check and a conversion check weeks 1 through 4. So you don't have any knowledge checks or conversion checks week 5 and 6 when you're wrapping up your big project. But those first 4 weeks you do. So make sure that you're staying on top of those. Knowledge checks also do 11:59 p.m. CST on Tuesdays. Any questions about that so far? I know I've already thrown a lot of information at you guys. And I know you guys know the ropes, but I just gotta review just in case. No questions? Okay, let's keep going then. Let me see here. All right, my computer makes me take like 12 steps after I stop sharing. All right, so we're gonna talk about cakes making us money, how we can price those cakes out. That's what your week 5 discussion forum about, is food costs. And I think that that's something really important. Math and cake is particularly important when it comes to making yourself money, because it's easy to undercharge. It's easy to underestimate how much money and labor truly went into that product. So the next thing I want to look at here is our course syllabus. The page in particular I want to look at is this percentage of what we do in this class. So discussion forums are worth 10% of your grade. Your homework, your practical assignments, 60% of your grade. Knowledge checks, this includes conversion checks, 15% of your grade, and then your final exam is worth 15% of your grade. So even though discussion forums seems like only 10%, that could have a pretty drastic, that's a letter grade. If you don't do your discussion forums, you can go from a B to a C, and that stinks if you're submitting really strong work. So just make sure that you guys are staying caught up on those things. I really don't want to see anybody not getting higher grades just because they didn't chime in on a discussion forum. Attendance, we want to make sure, as always, I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir, but attendance is something we expect you guys to be posting every week. Things that post attendance are coming to the live session, watching the archive, posting in a discussion forum, completing a knowledge check, and turning in an assignment. All of those things post attendance for you. So if you are doing your work like you should be week after week, then you're not going to have an attendance problem. If you are not, you are going to be hearing from me a lot. I'm sure some of you know this already, but we check in on you guys. We're helicopter moms. We hover over you guys. We want to make sure you get through this process. We want to help guide you to success. So if I notice that I haven't seen you for a few days, I'm definitely going to be texting you, maybe even calling you to check in and to see how I can help. So make sure you save my contact information. That's listed on our class page. It will be listed in your feedback. I will post it in every time I send you a message, I'll list my contact information at the bottom. So please never be afraid to contact me about that. You guys know the deal with our plagiarism policy. Submitting work that's not your own means you get a 0. It's that simple. We have a 0 tolerance policy for it. And you guys are really doing a disservice to yourself if you are using someone else's work, because remember, the skills that you're learning here are money for you. It's going to make you money. I can't emphasize that enough. So I think those are the main things on the syllabus I wanted to touch base on. Let's talk cake for a minute. Who's made a layered cake before, a decorated layered cake before? Anybody? Francis? Megan says she has. Paula says she has. Speak up, you guys. Willie says yes. Do you have any favorites? Do you have a cake that really sticks out in your memory? I'm going to pull up a picture of one of the first cakes that I ever decorated. I think it was the first cake, actually. See if I can find it. Sissy said a chantilly cake just recently. That's awesome. Here we go. Okay, so we did a cake project as a group. And this was our Super Mario cake. Yeah, look at little pastry chef, student Genevieve, all those years ago. Here, Chef Ryan, some of you may have met Chef Ryan. We were in the same pastry class together. We were all so excited about this cake. Now, truth be told, there is foam inside of this cake. This was really learning about fondant, wrapping and fondant. But I'll tell you what, you guys, I will never forget this cake. My dad actually still has a picture of this cake on his refrigerator because I was so excited about it, so proud of it. And it is not perfect. We learned a lot of hard lessons with that cake. For example, when fondant and gum paste dries, it shrinks, it gets smaller. So we made all these walls to the castle, and then when they dried, they did not fit together anymore because they were totally different sizes. So I want you guys to know that that's something else that we are about this class is I'm not expecting perfection. I'm not expecting you guys to be master cake decorators. Just like bread, decorating takes practice. There's no way around it. And so I don't want you guys to be too stressed about perfection. Sometimes, like this week, when we do a flat coat of icing, it can be hard not to let the perfection. I think all pastry chefs are a little bit of perfectionists. That's why we're drawn to this field. And it's going to be hard sometimes to be like, man, there's a little bubble right there, and I just wish I could fix it so bad. But sometimes you have to just let it lay. I can't tell you how many times I've had to re-ice an entire cake because I tried to fix like one little bubble that I could have covered with a buttercream flour or something. So I got lots of people talking about cakes here in the chat. Talk out loud, you guys.
Well, my cakes, they're hit and miss. Sometimes I could get a real nice decoration, other times because I get impatient. Because I want to get it done and I rush through it.
I get that. Something that we're going to learn, I think, in this class will be an appropriate way to break up cakes in a way that's not only manageable, but a way that you would do it in the industry. Because in the industry, we never have the luxury of only having one thing to do a week, right? We've got to make tons of stuff a week. We've got that cake is going out with 2 other orders that day. So we have to break our assignments up, not our assignments. Well, yes, our assignments too, but I mean, even future projects when you're working in the industry, we have to break them up into more manageable chunks in order to get everything done. All right, well, let's start talking about this week then. Let me, first of all, creaming method. You guys are pretty familiar with this, right? What cookie did you make in BK101 that used the creaming method? Do you remember?
Chocolate chip.
Chocolate chip definitely uses creaming method. Spritz cookies use creaming method. So creaming method is all about combining our fat and sugar first, our solid fat and sugar, right? So that means room temperature butter. I'm going to pull up our recipe here so we can walk through it. Let's see here. Okay, so you're gonna preheat to 350. Something I want you guys to know with cake in particular, especially like in week 4 when you're baking off your layers, I don't always bake my cakes at 350. Sometimes I bake at 325 and I let them bake a little bit more slowly, but I find that they bake a little more evenly. So especially now that you guys are so close to the end of the program, I just want to remind you that when there is a suggested temperature and bake time, it is exactly that, a suggestion. But you are the chef in charge of that cake, and you ultimately get to decide what's best for it. And a lot of times that is affected by other variables, like what equipment that you're using. Maybe you're in a different kitchen than normal, and what the weather is like that day. If it's a particularly humid day, that can alter things. So just keep that in mind. If you noticed that your cake got way too brown on the exterior but was underbaked on the interior, that might mean some adjusting of temperature is needed. Using your paddle attachment, you're going to cream together your butter and sugar until light and fluffy. So it's going to transition from a deeper shade of yellow to a light, pale shade of yellow. And it should really be sticking to the sides of your bowl. It should take closer to 8 minutes. So if you've only mixed for 2 minutes and you're like, chef, it's sticking to the sides of the bowl, it's not enough. What we are doing is not only combining our sugar and butter, but we are incorporating air into that product. So that's one of the reasons it's important that we give it the full time it needs in the mixer. It's also important, I know that you guys learned this when you first learned the creaming method, but that your eggs also be at room temperature. We creamed together our room temperature butter and sugar, and if we put cold eggs into that mixture, that butter is going to start to look curdled. It's not curdled, but it is solidifying and separating, and we don't want that. We want to keep our batter uniform. In addition to that, you need to add your eggs slowly. Your butter and sugar can only absorb so much moisture at a time. So if you add all of your eggs, again, that butter is going to separate. If you mix your eggs up, let's say your recipe has 2 eggs, in a separate container, mix them with a fork, whisk them together so you've got a nice smooth liquid as opposed to the yolk sitting in the white. That way you can slowly pour that liquid in as necessary instead of accidentally dropping the whole egg in. I know it seems tedious, but again, it will keep your batter more uniform, which will result in a better consistency in your final product. So after you've fully incorporated your eggs, make sure you're scraping your bowl in between each addition of egg. You're going to incorporate the rest of your dry ingredients. This says sift your flour. I always sift my dry ingredients together. It's just a habit that I've built. It's not necessarily required, but what you do need to do is make sure that your dry ingredients are well mixed before you incorporate them into the creamed butter and sugar. So what you don't want to do is put your flour on top of that butter, then a spoonful of baking soda, and then a spoonful of salt. Because that salt or baking soda is going to clump up in certain areas, and somebody's going to get a bite of a really metallic-y, salty piece of cake. So make sure that your dry ingredients are well mixed before incorporating them into your batter. And that's it. Once your batter is fully combined, I like to mix on a medium speed for 2 to 3 more minutes. The recipe, I think, says to do it for 5 more minutes. I don't think 5 whole more minutes is necessary. I think 2 to 3 at a medium speed is perfectly fine. With this batter, it depends. I can't tell you the exact weight to put in your pans for your layers because it depends on the size pan that you're using. Our weekly inventory list asks for an 8-inch pan, which is perfectly fine. You can absolutely use an 8-inch pan to make this cake. I recommend a 6-inch pan. A 6-inch cake is going to be a bit more manageable, a little easier to decorate, I think. It will be easier to make it top 3 layers instead of 2 layers. And also, 6-inch cakes are the most frequently bought. So nowadays, it used to be all about wedding cakes because people didn't really order cakes for a lot of different events. But like I mentioned earlier, Instagram has changed the game. And people are ordering cakes for baptisms, for Valentine's Day. They're ordering cakes at any opportunity they can order a cake. And it's usually a 6-inch cake. Whether it's a drip cake or decorated a little more intricately, this is the, I would say, most frequently bought size of cake. So it's a good one to practice. Looks like I maybe got a question down here. Some recipes require adding sugar to the flour. So there might be some sugar incorporated into the flour, but some sugar should still be being creamed with the butter. I haven't seen, if you shoot me a recipe where you've seen that, Willie, I might be able to give you a more clear answer on that. Sometimes it might just be separation of sugar for the amount of butter that you have. Maybe you don't have enough fat to mix it with the full amount of butter. But so any questions on creaming method? I think you guys got that. That's a review.
No, but do we need to up this recipe, like you said, 50 more %?
Yep, and I said that's in our field guide too, if you check out the field guide under week 1. So I think that this recipe needs to be increased by 50%. So having the whole recipe and 50% more, 1.5 times. Does that make sense? All right, and like I said, you might have a little leftover batter. You can make some cute cupcakes or something to put on the sides, but I would rather you have a little leftover batter than not have enough to have 3 even layers. Again, only 2 layers are required, but I do recommend 3. All right, let's jump into, I don't think we need to watch the creaming method video. I think you guys have got creaming method. I would rather focus on Italian buttercream, since that's the newer technique that we are learning this week. Cool with you guys? Sweet. I'm gonna make you talk eventually. Next week, I'm bringing a slideshow that's only pictures, and I'm gonna ask so many questions. I'm gonna call on you. All right. Let me get to my video here. All right, can everybody see that? Yep, okay.
Italian buttercream is a very light icing made from a combination of butter and Italian meringue. As with all buttercreams, it's important to use butter as the fat because of the desired creamy, melt-in-your-mouth texture and taste. Using shortening as a fat in this scenario would be undesirable, as it will result in the fat congealing and leaving a coating on the inside of the mouth. A crucial thing to note before beginning the preparation is that because this icing has a butter base, it's important that it doesn't get too warm, as it will melt. While it should be worked with at room temperature for the correct consistency, if the temperature of the room is too hot, it may affect your icing. Begin by adding the sugar and the water to a saucepan over medium to high heat. You're going to cook this until the sugar dissolves and the mixture boils and reaches 240 degrees, also known as softball stage. In the bowl of a stand mixer, add in the egg whites, then using the whip attachment, we're going to whisk them until they form very soft peaks.
I'm gonna skip over the loud mixer.
The egg whites at this point should look a bit foamy or frothy. We just want to give the meringue a little bit of a jump start before we add in the hot syrup. With the mixer operating on low, carefully and slowly pour the hot syrup into the whipping egg whites in a steady stream. Once your syrup is added, increase the speed to high and whip until the mixture cools to room temperature and is a shiny, firm meringue.
Okay, so I want to say a couple of things about this step. When you are pouring your sugar, your cooked sugar, into your egg whites, it should be coming into contact with the metal bowl first, not the egg whites at the bottom. So what I mean by that is if this is your bowl and it's a little tilted, your sugar should be going down the side of the bowl and dripping into the egg whites. If you pour your sugar directly over the egg whites as the mixer is on, it is going to splatter hot sugar all over you, and that's going to hurt. It's going to cook your egg whites incorrectly, so make sure that you are doing that carefully. It's a slow stream. You might need to use 2 hands to hold the pot, but make sure it's coming into contact with the side of your mixing bowl first, on the inside, of course, and then dripping into your egg whites, not pouring it directly over the egg whites so those don't explode on you. All right, back to sharing. So that was video magic. That cooled down much faster than it will take yours to cool down, okay? So I want you guys to remember that. Sometimes we have to use movie magic to keep those videos short. That meringue, once you've fully incorporated your sugar, needs to be mixed until room temperature. It needs to be cooled to room temperature before we start adding our butter cubes. If you've added your butter to your Italian meringue and it looks like soup, it means your meringue was too hot. So make sure that you are allowing it to cool completely before adding your butter.
At this point, the meringue, the Italian meringue, is completely cool. It's shiny, it's glossy, it's forming firm peaks. So it's ready to be back on the mixer and add the butter in. You don't have to stop, but it should be almost like marshmallow in texture. It'll be sticky, but shiny, glossy, and a firm meringue. It will be cool to the touch, so it should be room temperature. If it's still warm, the butter is going to melt when we put it in.
With the mixer on low, slowly add the butter a little bit at a time. Before adding more, allow each addition to be completely mixed before adding in more. It may take a few minutes to do this, but doing so ensures that you will not have chunks of unincorporated butter in your icing.
Do you see how small her butter cubes are and how slowly she's adding them? I know that seems tedious. Again, a lot of cake decorating is tedious. A lot of pastry is tedious, you guys. That's why not everybody does it. But for proper consistency, you can't add your butter too quickly. So make sure that you're cubing it to a decent size. And now, once you've incorporated probably 50% of your butter, you can start adding it in larger chunks. But for at least that first 50% of inclusions, when you're adding your butter, do it in those smaller portions.
Once all the butter has been added and the mixture is uniform, we're going to add the vanilla extract and allow it to fully incorporate. At this time, if you wanted to add chocolate, you can melt that first and then add it, allowing it to fully incorporate before taking it off the mixer. All right. As you can see, it's a shiny, smooth buttercream. There's no chunks of butter visible. There's no streaks of vanilla visible. So it's ready to put in a piping bag, decorate your cakes, fill your cakes. There you go. If any curdling has occurred, the butter was too cold when it was added. If this happens, continue to whip and it should eventually come together. If it still doesn't form, use a torch to heat the bottom of the bowl while continuing to whip with the mixer. The Italian buttercream is ready to use immediately after preparation, or it can hold covered for up to 5 days at room temperature. If the icing isn't being used right away, it must be refreshed in a mixer beforehand to restore the original smooth texture. This icing is also best suited for a...
Okay. Any questions after watching that video? Paula says, will we have to up the formula for the buttercream? No, I don't believe that you will. I think that I believe the buttercream formula makes plenty of buttercream. Any questions about Italian buttercream? No? You guys feeling confident about it? So making a meringue, right? Making an Italian meringue, a cooked meringue, then adding room temperature butter. We can do that. Looking again, too, I think that's something that you guys might notice, especially having had some of you having decorated cakes before in the past. I think you will find it easier to get a smooth coat on this cake with an Italian buttercream. Let's talk about cake assembly. I'm going to play another video for you guys, and then we're going to chat. Then I'm done with videos, and I'm going to force you guys to talk.
Simple layer cakes have 2 to 3 layers with filling or icing between them, and icing also covering the exterior. Construction of layer cakes is extremely important. If a cake doesn't have a solid assembly, it can collapse and won't stack evenly into a tiered cake. The layers should each be uniform, straight, and stable. If the layers were not baked individually, they will need to be split and leveled for uniformity. The cake should begin at room temperature or cool to do this. Never hot, never frozen. Hot cakes can collapse, and cutting a frozen cake can be dangerous. To start assembling the cake, you're going to need the following. So we have our buttercream already prepared. So this is an Italian buttercream. We refresh this so it's ready to go. We have our cake that's completely cooled and cut and ready to start stacking. We also have our tools. So I have an offset spatula, and I have a bench knife. So we can use this to ice the sides of the cake, especially.
So on the weekly inventory list, you will see a turntable. That's the cake plate that he's about to decorate on. It is not technically required, but it will make your life much, 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 much easier if you have one. Wilton makes a plastic version. I actually have 2 of the plastic ones. They're not the greatest turntable in the world, but they work. They get the job done when I'm in a pinch and I need more turntables at one time. So that's something that if the Wilton section at Walmart or Michael's, Hobby Lobby also has a baking brand that might sell turntables. Hobby Lobby sells the nice one, but the nice ones are a little bit expensive. So don't panic when you see that on the inventory list. If you don't have one and you don't have it in the budget to get one, you can elevate your cake on other items, and I can help you with that in the future. But so yeah, don't sweat that. But you absolutely do need a bench scraper. You need a bench scraper to get a nice, smooth, flat coat of icing.
For tall cakes, this comes in really handy. Another thing you're going to need is a cake circle. So this is a 6-inch cake circle that fits directly underneath this cake as we build it. So without this, it makes it very hard to move the cake from the turntable to another plate or presentation platter. So starting with this will really help a lot. So this goes down in the center of your turntable. You want to make sure your turntable turns easily, make sure that everything is working correctly, and then start with your first layer. You pop this right on top, and we're going to start with some icing. So I'm going to take a little bit of icing, and then using my offset spatula, and just kind of hold the cake a little bit. If it starts to slide around too much, you can ball up a little bit of masking tape or scotch tape and put that underneath, and that will help keep it in place. But once it starts to gain a little weight here, it will stay just fine. You want to move that buttercream out towards the edges while rotating, just like so. And then just smooth it out. After doing this for a long time, you kind of get an idea of how much buttercream to put in between each layer. For this type of cake, the layers are about 1 inch thick, so you want to go with about 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch of buttercream. You wouldn't want it any thicker than that. That would be too much. Then add your next layer. This is a good opportunity if you want to add some flavor to your cake as well. You could soak your cake, so you can make a little simple syrup, equal parts sugar and water, bring it to a boil, and then you can add alcohol, you could add fruit purees to that, you could add citrus juice, and you can brush that on the cake. You want to brush it on the side that has the pores that are open so that it will drink in all that flavor, and then continue with this process. Next layer, keep spreading this out, same amount. If you're unsure about the amounts, get yourself a portion scoop, and you can do a scoop for each one. That way you'll know each one is exactly the same.
You can also use a piping bag. I use a piping bag with a slightly wider tip. I spin my cake board and I pipe a spiral of icing, and it's all one even width because I was using a piping tip. So that's another technique.
Don't worry if it goes over the edge a little bit, we'll fix that later. Take the time to turn your cake around and make sure that you're straight up and down. This is the time you can fix any problems. I like to end with the cake that was originally baked towards the bottom of the pan, just because the crumbs are completely locked into the cake itself. So this makes it a little easier to ice later on. So we have a nice tall cake here. Make sure it's straight.
So something really important to note is that every cake has been trimmed. Even if you guys bake your layers and you're like, you know, it's only ever so slightly domed, maybe I don't need to trim this. No, you need to trim it. If your cake is not level, it will lean. That buttercream is going to start sliding around, gravity is going to take control, and your cake will start to tip over. So please, please, please make sure that you are trimming all of your layers, but you can hold on to your trimmings. 2 different uses for trimmings that I've used in my career. One, at most bakeries that I worked at, you'd cut off the top of the cake, save it in a Ziploc bag, maybe toss it in the freezer, and then later when we had some time, we'd combine that leftover cake with icing and make cake pops. It was cooked cake and buttercream mixed together, balled up and dipped in white chocolate that we sold for $3.50 a piece, and it was our leftover cake trimmings. So I want you guys to think about minimizing waste when you are working on your projects, because cake decorating will make you feel like there's a lot of waste, but there is use for leftovers. Another is bigger cakes, like your tiered cake, sometimes can have gaps or little holes, and I always save my leftovers because I fill those holes with my trimmings. Sometimes I have to do a little bit of patchwork underneath the buttercream or fondant. So don't throw your trimmings away right away. Hold on to them until you've at least finished your cake, because you might end up wanting to use them. Okay. Maybe.
Top is flat. And then all the edges here where some of the buttercream kind of oozed out, we can just gather that up with our spatula and just go around the edge, like so.
During this process, make sure to have already separated some icing into a separate bowl. This is your crumb coat bowl. You do not want to have one bowl of icing and do your crumb coat, because every time you scrape your spatula on that bowl, you're going to be getting crumbs mixed into the rest of your nice clean white icing. So you want to separate at least a third of your icing into a separate bowl for your crumb coat. That way, and it's okay to have crumbs in the crumb coat. We're gonna chill it. We're gonna put a whole coat of clean icing over it. You won't see them after that. But you just wanna make sure that you don't combine the two, that you keep your crumb coat icing separate from what you're gonna use for your final coat.
So the next thing we wanna do is our crumb coat. So the crumb coat is very important. It does a couple things. Like its name, it locks in the crumbs for the cake. So it'll make it easier to put the final coat on. It also helps preserve some of the moisture in the cake. So if you were to crumb coat a bunch of cakes, if you're doing this in volume, making a bunch of wedding cakes in your bakery, then you could keep these in the refrigerator and the crumb coat would seal in the moisture. So that helps there as well. Just like before, we'll start on the top and carefully spread the icing. And remember, this is a crumb coat. It's okay to see the cake shining through the icing. If you're more comfortable with a spatula that is straight-sided, then that's what you use. If you're more comfortable with an offset spatula, like I was using before, then that is okay too. So to apply the crumb coat, just come up over the cake and just start moving your spatula back and forth. You don't want to drag it into the cake, you want to just glide over the top. If you're filling your cake with something like a lemon curd or something that's a little bit more loose, then you can make a dam. So you could pipe a little bit of this buttercream around the edge of your cake and then put your filling inside and then continue with each layer all the way up through. And this way the filling will leak out on the end, on your end product. So the sides look good. The top has like a little crown, so we want to remove that. So I like to think of it like an airplane. So you come in like so, and then you're going to just skim across the surface. We'll do it like this, right across, like so. Come in and just skim right across the surface. You don't want to go like this because then you create a rounded edge or you may open up the cake. So that completes our crumb coat. And next we will do our masking or our final coat with the Italian buttercream. So now you can be more generous with the icing. So I like to put quite a bit on, and it's going to look like a lot, and that's okay. But we're going to remove it as we start to clean up the edges. It's easier to do that than try to patch up the cake, adding a little bit at a time. Pile on the top, spread to the edges. Often I clean my spatula just to make sure it's clean here so I can get a cleaner edge on the surface. And then using your turntable, just gently start to turn, holding your spatula at an angle and applying medium pressure. You want to start to create that flat surface, and you want the icing to roll over the edge a little bit because we're going to capture that when we do the sides, and it's going to make a very clean seam around the top. So same process we did before, same method. Start to apply. I'm being a little more generous.
You guys can be really generous. I find the more generous I am, the easier it is because
the motion I'm doing is just a rocking.
During the smoothing out process, when you're trying to get it to be a flat coat, you're going to be removing a lot of the icing. So don't be too nervous to really glob some on there initially because you almost need a really thick second coat in order to be able to smooth it out enough to be that flat coat of icing. Something else, again, movie magic, your crumb coat should be cold. So don't crumb coat and then immediately go over it with your second coat. You can do that, but after much more practice and experience. It's really difficult. I don't do that, and I've been baking cakes for 8 years. Hey, sorry, my dogs are getting excited over cakes. So yeah, crumb coat should be cold in the refrigerator. Let it be stiff to the touch. Like your finger shouldn't make a dent in it when you take it out of the fridge. It should be pretty firm, and you will have a much easier time getting the second coat of icing on.
Motion. back and forth. I'm not cutting into the cake in any way, just rocking the blade back and forth. Okay, now the fun part. Using your bench knife, you can still use your spatula if you'd like, but this is fun because it's nice and firm and it's tall, just like our cake. So we'll start on the side here, and we're just going to go around the edge, just gently, even pressure from top to bottom. Try not to rush this process. It does take a little bit of time and it takes a lot of patience. After you do it over and over and over, it becomes much easier. And to finish the top, we do the same way we did before. So we're going to come in, and we're just going to sweep right across the top.
Okay. You guys feel good about that? Any questions about stacking, layering, crumb coat, flat icing? That was a lot in one video. No?
Now on our Italian buttercream, do we have to up the recipe too?
No, I don't believe you should need to. I think the formula makes enough to crumb coat and cover your cake. Evelyn says we can make the yellow buttercream and cake the day before assembling. Absolutely. You in that Italian buttercream video, Chef Ann told us up to 5 days you can store that Italian buttercream in an airtight container. So you can definitely make your frosting ahead of time. You can absolutely bake your layers ahead of time. Chef Paul mentioned in his video not to cut frozen cake. That's true. But I let my cake cool and then I put it in the refrigerator wrapped in plastic until it's really cold because it's a little stiffer and I have a much easier time trimming my layers if my cakes are cold. So I like to bake my layers off at least a day before so that they can chill in the fridge before I attempt to trim them and crumb coat them. How long would we store it? So the cakes, your cake layers, I wouldn't do, unless you are freezing them, I wouldn't do more than 3 days ahead of time because it will eventually begin to dry out no matter how tightly we keep it wrapped. Your buttercream you can do up to 5 days ahead of time. Any more questions? Those were good ones. The last thing we have to talk about today is piping our shell border. So this is a classic traditional technique, but it is one that you will use frequently, even for other things other than piping buttercream. So, 1 second. Let me get this dog in order here. She's wrestling around. Okay, so the way I feel about piping techniques is that again, walking before we run, but part of that means going old school before going new school. These piping techniques have been used for ages, for cakes on ages. I have 2 piping books from the 70s that I picked up at a yard sale that I love and are some of the most instructive piping technique books that I've ever found. And all of the techniques in that book are still used constantly today. So the last thing I want to look at is this picture of our cake here. So on our class page, the last thing under your assignments, it says, this is what your cake should look like. And it is just a picture of a flat iced white cake with a shell border. I love this size border for this size cake. I think it's dramatic. It makes a presence. You don't have to make it this large. I would not make it any bigger than this. Any bigger than that, I think, would be really overpowering. But I am looking to see a shell border, a consistent motion piped border. There's a video on our class page that you guys can check out. So what I am not looking to see, I mentioned it beforehand, but worth repeating, is some sort of bead border where you are making a dot and pulling away, making a dot and pulling away. Sometimes people do that with their star tip. That's not what I'm looking to see. I'm looking to see a continuous motion. Part of this is not only because it's beautiful and a classic technique, but it's about speed. I want you guys to think about, again, going back to let's say it's a cake shop. You guys are running a cake shop. All you do is cakes. In addition to big orders, you have to make small stuff like this to sell out of the case up front every day. And you will have, if it's a cake shop, sometimes they'll have 20 of these flat iced cakes up front every day for people to come in and buy. When you are icing cakes in a speedy and quick way, as fast as you can, it's going to take you much less time to be able to spin your turntable, pipe, 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 as opposed to pulling away. It's not a huge difference in time if you're only making one cake, but if you're making 20 cakes, having a continuous motion while you're icing or piping is going to save you time than having one that you have to start and stop over and over and over. So that's what you guys are doing this week. It's simple, but definitely still challenging. So be patient with yourselves. Please give yourselves plenty of time to work on it. Break it up into smaller chunks. Make your frosting up beforehand. Make your layers beforehand. You are going to have, I think, much more fun if you allow yourself that preparation. What do you guys think? Questions? Paula's giving me a thumbs up. Shannon's like, please don't.
I have a question.
Yes, Yvonne, please.
Does it have to be just a regular vanilla cake and flavor it?
You can do any creaming method cake you'd like. So if you want to flavor it, sure. As long as it's still creaming method, totally fine by me.
Okay.
For your frosting, I would like you guys to leave it white this week. Don't worry, we're going to get into color. If you want to reach out to me, if you're like, Chef, I've been making cakes forever, I know how to color icing, like, can I do it? Reach out to me and we'll talk about that. But adding color to icing is not as easy as food coloring used to be. It takes time, the icing takes time to like fully absorb that color. You'll notice if you put a drop of red in icing, it'll be pink on that first day, and it'll be nearly maroon the next day because that icing absorbs that color slowly. So try and keep your cakes white this week, please. Try to, if you want to decorate it more after the border, you take a picture first of your simple white cake with your border, and then decorate it with your other things, and I'm perfectly fine with that. What else? Any more questions? We're down to the last few minutes here, so now's the time.
I have a question about cake, but it's not necessarily related.
No problem, Kelly.
So I made my daughter's wedding cake.
Uh-huh.
And we actually transported it, not all the way done, but from Nevada to Oregon. So yeah, it was.
Wow.
So I froze it, and there were 4 tiers. And the chocolate tier, I put ganache filling and froze it.
Yeah.
I just crumb coated it and froze it. And then when we got there, I decorated everything, blah, blah, blah. When we cut it, it was dry as a bone. Only the chocolate.
Interesting. I'd have to know the brand of chocolates. I wondered too, what the ratio of cream to chocolate was in the ganache. But I typically avoid freezing my cakes entirely, especially when they have fillings. Something that I do when I'm transporting cakes, and it's harder, this is again with cake decorating where equipment really comes into play, but I have this big metal box, and underneath there's a shelf on the bottom. And underneath that shelf, I put dry ice, a cube of dry ice, which is expensive. A cube of dry ice costs like $30, but I put that dry ice in the bottom. I put my cake on top. It has like pulls for me to keep my cake steady. And then I shut it, lock it. It's like an airtight. And so that keeps my cake super, super cold as I transport it when I have to go farther along. But why don't do you have pictures, Kelly, of the cake?
I do.
Sure. Go ahead and send me some, and send me a message with the recipe that you used, and I'll see if I can try and identify what the issue was.
Okay. I don't know if I can remember.
Oh, no stress about it. No stress about it. Shannon asked about gel color. Yes, Americolor gels are great, and gel color is what you guys should be using when we get into buttercream flowers and we start working more on color theory. gel color is the way to go. We don't want to use powdered color. It really affects the consistency. And you definitely don't want to use liquid color because that can cause all sorts of problems. So the days of the red, yellow, green, blue tubes of food coloring at the grocery store are no more. We want to be, we're done with those. Paula asked about Russian piping tips. I think Russian tips are great, but I think that they are more for novice bakers, people who do not have the skills to pipe buttercream flowers and to pipe those small decor things. I think they're also great for like really quick decorating, like if you've got to make 400 cupcakes in a day, maybe you use a Russian piping tip. For those of you who don't know, a Russian piping tip basically pipes out the whole flower at once, but it looks a little different than it went piping individual petals, which is what we're going to learn to do. So we don't want to invest in any Russian piping tips for this class, but I am glad you brought up tips. The last thing I want to share with you guys before we leave for the day is a piping tip that that I don't believe you have in your kit yet that you will need for this class, and that is the petal tip. This is what it looks like. It looks like a raindrop. I like to use Wilton's 104. It's small, so it makes small flowers. If you want bigger flowers, then you got to go bigger than that. Different brands have different sizes. The sizes generally are pretty close to each other, though, but I'm not looking for any specific size of petal by the time we get to our buttercream flowers. So whichever you want to use, I recommend maybe getting two, maybe getting a larger one and a smaller one so you can make two different size flowers in week 3 when we get to this step. But a petal tip is something that you'll want to invest in. Again, Walmart has a baking section. It's not in the groceries where the baking food is. It's in the craft section where like the fabric is. That's where their Wilton baking supply section is, and you can pick up a tip there. You can buy it individually. You can buy a set of 2. Sometimes you can buy a little kit if you feel like doing that. That's more expensive to invest in, but that petal tip, even just one petal tip will go a long way. So make sure that you guys are prepared for that for week 3. Francis asked about cake pan sizes, 6-inch by 1-inch or 6-inch by 3-inch. Doesn't really matter except for your 3-inch, you could bake 1 layer and cut that layer in half. Your 1-inch is only going to bake 1 layer of cake, if that makes sense. Now, I prefer to do it that way. I don't like to try and cut my layers in half. I just prefer to make the number of layers I need individually and trim off the dome tops. I find them to be more level that way. Willie said, where could you find a real turntable? I know that Hobby Lobby and usually Michael's both sell the higher quality turntable as well.
I was going to say for the piping tips,
yep.
Michael's, you can use the 40% off coupon when they have them weekly to get them kind of cheaper if they need to buy like a kit or something for them.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Michael's and Hobby Lobby both always have. Okay, that was exciting. Michael's and Hobby Lobby both have the nice turntables. Gina asked, which coloring for the meringue-based icings is regular gel best, or will the oil-based candy colors work better due to fat content? Nope, regular gel icing. But again, this week, avoid using color. We want to work on our flat white cakes first. We're going to dive into color into week 3. All right, you guys, I think that's it. I think I got any questions from the chat. If you have any other questions, please message me. You guys know I'm here. Texting is the fastest way to get a hold of me. That info is listed on our class page in the previous message I sent you. So if you have a question, you can text me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I think that's it for now, you guys. Thanks for coming to week 1. Are you excited? Shannon's excited. Let's bake. Paula, yes. Francis, yes. I'm going to assume you're all excited. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being here. I'm here if you need me.
Thank you.